Are you a psychiatrist with a telepsych practice wondering, WTF are the rules for seeing patients via video these days? So much has changed with the public health emergency with COVID and Ryan Haight being temporarily suspended, but it's going to be reactivated at some point and no one knows when. This topic comes up a lot in the group Q&A calls in my mentorship program, and recently the APA, American Psychiatric Association, had a webinar on the topic. So I went and took notes and reported back to the group about what I learned. Let's check out a clip from that Q&A call.
One of the things, I don't know if people looked at, this is my post in the forum, I don't know if people looked at the slides that I have attached to this, but there's some questions at the end, like, if you're seeing a patient in this state and they go back to college here, can you keep prescribing them their, Adderall or whatever? And like the answers, and there was a poll, and like nobody knew the answers, and so it just shows that we all are a little bit lost with the guidelines. And so if you feel like confused, you're a good company, which makes me feel better, because if everyone's confused, then there can't be that crazy strict enforcement, because it's a waste of their time, of like the DA's time to enforce misunderstandings. They can really only enforce really clear guidelines. So let me just kind of explain like what I learned on here. The first thing they really emphasized is that like things literally are changing like week to week, month to month. So this is true as of when they recorded it, but it could change quickly. And the day of the talk, it was like in the talk, they said, oh, the public health emergency was just extended, and so now we're good, I think, through April. It's 90 days from when it was supposed to expire in January. And they did say, so the government will give us a 60-day notice prior to the federal public health emergency ending, which kind of at the end of this, I explained like my plan. To me, I heard that and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do nothing different then, because 60 days to me is enough time to figure out a plan. Because, and I'll skip ahead to this, there is a like a telemedicine special registration that's potentially in the works with the DEA, which is currently not active, but it sounds like it would be a potential exemption that could apply to us. And it's not like there's not clear like what the exemption would be, but might be some exemptions that could apply to us where we're not having to see everyone in person who we're doing controlled substances for. So to me, it sounds like the intention is to have that done to solve the issue everyone's going to have when the public health emergency is lifted. It's not at all a guarantee that the government is going to get around to actually passing anything, or the DEA will get around to coming up with this prior to it expiring. But to me, that was enough of a question mark where it felt like if I put a bunch of work into planning for this now, it feels like a waste of time. I'd rather just wait to see what the actual law is. And I know either way, I'm going to have 60 days to prepare. So this is one other thing that I didn't really think of consciously, but like the federal rules are different from state-based rules. So like the public health emergency is federal, but a lot of the state-based rules have expired. So, and I actually don't even know what it is in California. Like, am I breaking some rule with that? I'm not honestly sure, because most of these state-based rules have expired. However, they also said somewhere that it sounds like the states are trying to use the federal rules as guidelines. So that also feels like it would change too. This is where it got like really confusing. This is also why I'm going to wait. Why I'm like, that's really confusing. So maybe I'm breaking a state law currently. I'm not sure, but the state law might change, especially if they come up with the telemedicine special exemption, then the state's going to want to like follow that. And so I'm just like, it's kind of a mess. I'm just going to wait till we get more guidance. But you might want to check specific state rules where you are. And to me, where that really comes up is liability. I would be less worried that you're going to get like a citation for something. I mean, that's possible, but to me, like, it's so confusing that you could very easily be like, this was confusing, sorry, I'll never do it again. Where you wouldn't want to make a mistake, I think, is with liability. And you want to double check with your malpractice, first of all, that they even cover telehealth, because apparently like it's not an automatic thing for all malpractices. So just double check like you're covered for it, and let them know what you're doing in your practice to make sure that you're covered. Because if you have an adverse event and you are not following the rules strictly, potentially your malpractice might not cover you. And so like, I think the risk of any of us being sued is like extremely low, but you kind of want to, with rules, prevent against catastrophic problems. Like getting a citation and saying sorry, that to me is like a minor thing, but getting sued and then you're not covered, that could be potentially catastrophic. So you want to prevent like that rare but potentially catastrophic stuff. This is a big thing that I had answered incorrectly on calls before, I think, because I didn't realize that there is an exemption. But for those of you licensed in multiple states who are prescribing in multiple states, you currently do not need a DEA registration in each state. You only need a DEA registration in one state. And this is while the public health exemption is active. So the second that it's not active though, and it's ended, you're going to have a DEA license in every state. So like be on the lookout for that 60-day notice. I don't know how long it takes to get a DEA registration in another state. I imagine it'd be somewhat quick if like you already have your main DEA registration, but I don't know because I only have it in my state. So you might want to just double check on like what that timeline would be. And as long as it gives you well enough room that you could get it done within 60 days, I would say just wait on getting multiple DEAs until there's like more, the rules are more clear and like the public health emergency, it's been announced it will be ending. Now, this was another thing that had come up, and I think I gave also incorrect advice because I didn't realize that there was this exemption, but apparently some states, and you have to look up the state rules, but some states will allow you to see patients in their state on a consultation basis, as long as there's a primary psychiatrist that is in that state that is like the primary person responsible for the patient's care. So that would allow you, like, I don't know what states allow it, but let's just randomly say Arizona. That would allow me, being in California, to have a patient based in Arizona who has a primary psychiatrist, but I'm more kind of like an expert coming in some specific area and doing consultations. And so I wouldn't have to be licensed in that state. So I didn't realize that. That's useful for a lot of us who have very specific niches, and you maybe are curious, like, hey, I'd like to kind of broaden the areas where I could potentially see patients or potentially use my expertise in a consultation basis with another psychiatrist. That kind of broadens how you might be able to do that. Now, seeing patients located internationally, I don't think this is that relevant to most of you, but it was relevant to me, so I put it down because I have one patient who's in Germany. He's used to live in LA, and now he like travels back and forth between Germany and the US. So I see him in the US every 3 months, but then I see him like on Zoom when he's in Germany. So I'm technically not following this rule because you're supposed to technically be licensed where the patient is located while you're seeing them. And it really comes down to like data privacy regulations. So like HIPAA is obviously in the US, Europe, the European Union, and whatever country is going to have their own rules. So you have to follow the rules in that country. Now, I'm not worrying about it so much with this patient because it's such a one-off thing. I've seen this guy for like years and years. I know this guy's like not going to sue me, and how would the European Union find out, you know? So I'm not like worrying too much about it, but just something to kind of keep in mind. Now, I know this has come up because there's like at least one person in this program who's located in another country, but licensed in a US state and seeing patients here. It sounds like the only area where that would matter is with insurance billing. Like, and actually this person is, I think, working with Alma. So there might just be something with like the location you're supposed to be at if you're billing insurances. I didn't really pay that close attention to it because it's not relevant to my particular situation or to many of you, but just putting it in there for anyone. If like, I think there was someone else in the program too who wanted to like move to Singapore with family, but then see patients in the US. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, this was something that was kind of emphasized, that there's speculation that there's going to be more enforcement coming up in the future telehealth rules than there has been in the past, specifically for behavioral health and psychiatry, basically because of cerebral. Like no one said the word cerebral on this talk. Maybe they couldn't because of like trademarking issues, or I don't know, like they didn't want to get sued, but it was like the implied thing that everyone was thinking. So just something to keep in mind, there hasn't been a lot of enforcement, but that might change. And virtual addresses may be audited in the future. Like, I think this probably applies to a lot of us. So I honestly have just my public facing practice address is a PO box, but written to look like a street address. However, I did make sure that my DEA license is registered to my home. And I mean, my medical license is registered to that public facing because that you can look up, but I probably am risking something by doing that because that could technically be audited. So in the back of my head, I'm thinking like long term, especially when the public health emergency is lifted, I probably will like sublet an office or have some sort of agreement where I can, with someone where I can receive mail at an office. That's just kind of what I'm thinking in terms of 6-month plan. Like eventually I've got to kind of come up with a little bit of a better system than I'm doing right now. I already covered this. This is the other thing that was emphasized. The APA gets that all of this is really confusing. Kind of there should be more exceptions than there are. It will kind of really mess up things if the public health emergency is lifted without additional regulations in place. So they're aware of this and they're doing a lot of advocacy. I think especially regarding that telemedicine special exemption regulation thing that's in the works with the DEA. So that made me feel better. It's like people in high places are aware that this isn't an unnecessarily complicated, difficult, and hopefully they will be putting their voice into the rules that do get written. So again, this was kind of like my summary statement of my plan, which is essentially to do nothing, wait till that 60-day notice comes out, see what that telemedicine special exemption is, if anything, but reach out. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to reach out to my malpractice and just make sure I'm doing everything above board so that I'm covered in case there's like an adverse event. Let me just stop sharing, just see if people had questions in the chat. Oh yeah, I saw Sophia put DEA licenses are quick, like 1 to 2 weeks. And then it kind of had a question about if the rules are different for MD DOs versus NPs. I mean, that's a good question. This was MDs. So if there was something different for NPs, they probably wouldn't have brought it up. So I guess the answer is like, I'm not sure. You would maybe want to double check that. And then, oh, okay. And then I saw just Claudia actually answered that. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, that makes more sense to me. Like, why would it be different? It kind of like, go ahead, Claudia.
Sorry, I'm just looking at I just pulled up the original DEA law, and it just defines practitioner. It says practitioners. Okay. So I would say that would be probably just universal, and then depending, you have to have your collaborating physician in each state, right? That would, yeah, that's definitely important. So
yeah, that's a great point. Kind of has to be coordinated with a collaborating physician. But yeah, and that makes sense. Like if the wording on if you're ever like looking up the wording on like the formal rule and you're like, this makes sense. I can kind of a basic human being would understand this to mean X, then I think you can reasonably assume it means X, you know, because like to me, I would want to be able to explain, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing what was reasonable. And like so that if I were to get a citation or something, I at least could say that. So I think that sounds totally reasonable. Any other questions anyone had on that topic before I move on to Anaya's question?
Well, and I just have a question. Oh,
Oh, hey, Vanessa.
do you have to like move the license from state to state, or do you have to apply in each state, or how does that work? Like you have to pay $800 each time you apply for different DEAs in different states?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I presume you have to pay. I don't know. Sophia, do you know that? Or I don't know if Sophia's there. But...
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm just cooking dinner.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so if you're moving a DA, it's free. So like when I moved my DA from New York to Massachusetts, it's free. It took about a week to get it. It was super easy. But I don't prescribe controlled substances in New York, so I only have one. But if I wanted to do that, when I looked into that, yeah, I'd have to pay another $888 to New York, and I'd have to have a physical presence there, which I really don't have. So yeah, each place you want to prescribe controlled substances requires its own $888 DEA once the public health emergency is over. And you have to have like a physical location in each of those states.
Yeah, I think that having multi-state practices is going to just become more cumbersome. And I know for many of you, there's a good reason to do it, like New York, New Jersey, those states are just right next to each other. Some of the states in the Midwest, you know, like they're just right next to each other and it makes sense. A lot of patients are getting care among those states. But for like, if you're in a big state or even just like a medium-sized state, there's more than enough patients in your state to fill a practice. And like the whole thing with having to get a physical address in multiple states and have an actual presence in case you get audited and you're paying licensing fees from multiple states, DEA registrations in multiple states, you're tracking regulations in multiple states. For a solo practice, it seems like it would be a lot of work. I mean, maybe if you have a vision of like a big center, a group practice, then it's worth that extra money and kind of attention to the regulations. But it seems like it's going to become more of a headache in the future to do that than like less.
I hope you found that helpful, and the APA is a great resource for getting ongoing updates as the rules change. If you found this video interesting, you're going to want to watch this one next, where I talk to my mentorship group about how to use ChatGPT, the new AI language model, in a psychiatry practice. Interesting stuff. Also, if you're interested in learning more about my mentorship program, you can also click the link below in the description. I'll see you soon.